Hello and welcome to another video with me, Christian Rauchenwald. Now in today's video we are going to take a look at Idena, the first proof-of-person blockchain on the market, and I'm going to focus on what's in it for you. So what would you have to do to earn iDNA tokens, and is it worth your time? And I can already take away that with roughly 30 minutes effort of your time every couple of weeks, you will be able to earn anywhere from a few dollars to around $50 worth of Idena per validation. Now you might be wondering what validations are, how they work, and so on, and I promise I will cover all of that in this video. Before we get to that, however, let's start with what makes Idena different and also point out some of the potential downsides that I see with the project. First of all, Idena, as mentioned, is a proof-of-person blockchain, so it aims to create a situation where each user can only have one wallet. If you compare it with Bitcoin and Ethereum, where you can create countless wallets, it's obviously already vastly different. And you might be wondering, what's the purpose of a proof-of-person blockchain and of only having the ability to create one Idena wallet and not multiple wallets? Well, if you think about it, if you nowadays visit the website or an online community, you very likely see a button like sign in with Google or sign in with Facebook, which is very convenient for you, but in addition to be convenient for you, also provides Facebook, Google, or which other service you're using to log in with information about which platforms you are using and how often you are visiting them. And among other things, Idena tries to address that problem, so giving you an online identity that's truly anonymous, because when you visit a website that supports sign in with Idena, you log in with your Idena wallet basically, and therefore you stay anonymous. At no point does the platform know your email address, your first name, last name, and so on, unless you actively provide them with that information separately from your login. And personally, I think this is a really great idea, because if Idena were to succeed on the markets and a lot of websites, forums, communities, and so on adapt or use or integrate the sign-in with Idena function, we would have a method to actually sign in into those platforms while staying truly anonymous. Now, the big question, however, is how does Idena make sure that you can only have one Idena wallet/identity, which is also the important part of this video for those of you who are just here to figure out how and how much money they can earn with Idena, because in order to verify your identity and keep it verified, you will have to perform validation events within the Idena network that occur in different intervals depending on the current network size. Now you can see an image right here that shows you the intervals, and you see that once the network reaches a certain size, the interval between events will always be 28 days and the validation would always occur on Saturday. This also brings up one of the first challenges or issues that I personally have with Idena, although I'm unfortunately unable to provide a solution for that, because in order to ensure that no user is able to validate multiple wallets, all users have to perform the validation at the same time. For that purpose, Idena picked 1:30 p.m. UTC as the time of the validation, because that equals 6:30 a.m. in San Francisco, and at the same time it's only 11:30 p.m. in Sydney, Australia. Therefore, it's a time where theoretically everybody on this planet could be awake and available to perform the validation. However, just because theoretically that's during a time where most people or all people should be available, and it's ideally on a Saturday where most people are off from work, it still means that this is one of the biggest limitations of Idena and will be, in my opinion, one of the major reasons why Idena might not achieve a huge market share, because a lot of people simply will not have time to attend those validations. So while the validation will be at 6:30 a.m. in San Francisco on a Saturday ideally, it doesn't mean that all people that signed up for Idena or learned about Idena actually have time to attend that validation. On the other hand, as said, I don't see any other solution, because the only way to make sure that all users or each user can only have one identity is to enforce them all to perform the validation at the same time and to punish people who miss validations, because if you miss validations, it would give you the chance to perform the validation with another wallet, and so you could in the end still have multiple wallets/identities. So Idena simply, I think, found the best solution to a horrible problem or challenge here. Now, before we move on to what that validation actually looks like and what you have to do to earn your Idena rewards, which again you can then transfer to, for example, the Probit exchange and exchange there into USDT and then other cryptocurrencies for that matter, I want to quickly summarize what we've learned so far. Idena is a proof of person blockchain aiming basically to make sure that each user only has one wallet without requiring any kind of KYC verification, so without requiring you to prove your identity with your passport or other documents, but by simply performing or participating in validation events. And to ensure that no user can scam the system, in quotes, those validations always occur at the same time all around the world, so for the entire Idena network or user base. So the next question is, how does this validation look like and which tasks do you actually have to complete to pass the validation? And to show you how it works, I'm going to quickly share my screen with you guys. And what you can see here is a so-called flip challenge. So you see a series of pictures in two variations, a left column and a right column, and those pictures should make some sense, and you have to choose which of those columns actually makes sense. So on the left we see a tear in some cloth, a woman that's sad, upset or something like that, somebody walking on the construction site, and a picture of a nail, which does not make a lot of sense. On the right, however, we see, okay, people walking on a construction site, a nail, as a result the tear in the cloth, and then the woman being upset about the tear in the cloth. So in this case, obviously the right option is the correct one, so we select right and next. Which brings us to the next flip during the validation process, and again we see a series of pictures. One of those makes sense and the other one doesn't, and you have to pick which one does and which one doesn't. Pick the right option from the buttons here and click next. Now, one thing I want to point out here is that the validation or the flips that you just saw were not from a live validation, but from an Idena demo site where you can check how flips work, and you can find a link to that in the description of the first pinned comment down below. The actual validation within Idena just looks slightly different, but it's exactly the same in the end. So you see two rows with each 4 pictures, and you have to pick or select which one actually makes sense, and then click on next. Another important aspect of the Idena validation events is that they are split up in 2 different so-called sessions. The first session is called the short session or short validation session, and the second part is called the long validation session. Now, it doesn't really matter what they're called, the difference is quite simple. When the validation event starts, each user has 2 minutes to solve the first 6 flips, which is the so-called short validation period or session or event. And after that, you have roughly 30 minutes to solve the rest of the flips, for a total of somewhere between 25 and 30 flips altogether. Out of those 2 validation sessions, the first one, so the one where you have to solve 6 flips within 2 minutes, is meant to make sure that each person can only validate one identity or account. However, if you practice a little bit with flips and you see the flips that users submitted, you will notice that it's quite easy to submit more than 6 flips within 2 minutes, so that it's quite easy actually for most people to validate 2 Idena identities, which in the end defies the purpose of Idena. But again, that's one of the problems that Idena faces when trying to make sure each user only has one account without actually requiring identification. Now, if that were all that is to Idena, it would actually be really great. It would mean you create your Idena account, you participate in validations, and in return you receive Idena coins that you can exchange for other cryptocurrency or fiat currencies. However, that's not all there is to it. The whole thing gets a little bit more complicated. Now, I'm going to put a picture up here that indicates or shows the flow of a user when you pass a validation event or when you miss or fail a validation event. You can see it starts with invitation activated, so you will need an invitation code, which is another issue, but we'll get to that when I actually show you the sign-up process later in the video. Once you've activated the invitation code, you are a so-called candidate, and as you can see, the blue arrow indicates what happens when you pass the validation, and the red arrow indicates what happens if you miss or fail the validation. So if you miss or fail the validation after activating your invitation code, your identity gets killed, and basically you would need to create a new one and get a new invitation code and start over again. If you, however, pass that first validation, your status changes from candidate to newbie, and among other things, you are then able to also mine Idena by running the Idena desktop application on your computer. On top of that, however, if you look closely, you'll also notice that it says create free flips, which is one of the other issues that I personally have with Idena, because every time you pass a validation as a newbie, or if you look further below, verified or human user, you actually have to submit at least 3 flips, which means Idena will provide you with 2 keywords like, I don't know, like rain and party, and you will have to look for 4 pictures using, for example, Google's image search to make a story that contains those words, and then basically submit your own flips, and during the next validation event other users will see those flips and will be able to report them if they don't fulfill the requirements. Now if you submit flips and they fulfill the requirements, your earnings will increase. If your flips however get reported by other users for not containing the right words or for other violations of the requirements for flips, you will actually have to pay a penalty, so you will lose Idena coins. And so it's possible that you pass the validation and you receive rewards for the validation, but at the same time you actually lose some coins for penalties for crappy flips, and in the end you make plus minus zero or maybe even a small loss. Now personally, I obviously understand why Idena requires users to submit flips because they are needed for the validation events. I just don't understand why it's never ending, so why we always, even once you reach the human status, you still have to submit flips to the network. Because personally I think at some point there should be enough flips to support the entire validation event, and there should be no need to submit additional flips by every user, because that's really the annoying part of the validation event. Besides that, the other issue, risk or downside is that what happens if you miss validations. Personally, I attended 4 validations to achieve the verified status, and then I went on vacation and actually missed 1 validation, so now my status is suspended. If I were to miss the validation in 9 days, my status would actually change to killed, and if I passed that one, it should go back to verified, and then I would have to pass another validation, assuming that I have a high validation percentage, so getting a lot of the flips right and only a few of them or none of them wrong, to actually achieve the human status, at which point I would also be able to share some invitation codes, which brings us to another problem that I already mentioned earlier, the invitation codes. Because users have to participate in a network for a very long time, so you have to pass a certain number of validations or achieve a certain percentage of validations in order to be able to receive invitation codes that you can then share, and you only receive a limited number of invitation codes. So as a result now, when you sign up and you need an invitation code, you can currently only join, for example, the Idena Discord or the Idena Telegram channel and ask for the invitation code there. However, because those invitation codes are in quotes limited, people are not just freely sharing them, but they wait for 1 or 2 days before the event before they share them with users, because for most people, if I were to give them an invitation code today, well, in the 9 days until the next validation, they would already forget about it and miss the validation, which means I would have wasted my invitation code. So that's another thing that I personally don't like about Idena. I think there should be no need for invitation codes, but the simple possibility to create your account, or users should get invitation codes earlier to share them, or they should get more to share them to help grow the network faster. And I understand why the validation events are only every 4 weeks, because if I would have to attend the validation every week or every 3 days or something like that, I wouldn't bother at all. On the other hand, it also means if in 10 days from now, so right after the validation event, I invite someone for Idena, they will actually have to wait 4 weeks and actually remember, okay, in 4 weeks I have to do that thing and remember how it's done, which means that a lot of people that you will invite to Idena might simply forget about it until they even have the chance to pass the validation. But even considering all those downsides or issues that I personally have with Idena and the way how things are done, I still believe it's worth the time, because for attending validations, which takes you roughly 15 to 30 minutes every couple of weeks, and for going through the effort of submitting at least 3 new flips after the validation, you receive anywhere from $1 to $56, or at least that was the payout that people received after the last validation event. In other words, if you keep participating in the validation events, so you are with Idena for a very, very long time, the amount that you receive as validation rewards also slowly increases, which means it makes it more profitable for you the longer you stick with Idena. And then considering that potentially you could earn $50 for spending 30 minutes of your time, well, that would be $600 in a year for basically 6 hours of your time, and I think that's definitely worth doing. And it doesn't really matter if Idena establishes itself on the market as some kind of virtual or anonymous identity system or not, because the only thing that matters to you in that case is how many Idena rewards do you receive for completing the validation, and what's the current value of Idena that you can basically exchange them to. And with all that out of the way, let's take a look at how you can actually get started with Idena. Now, there are two different options for you. Number one is to download their desktop application, which I will show you briefly in this video as well. Number two, which is likely applying for most of you, is to use the so-called web app. And while I would like to show it to you on the phone, unfortunately on my phone, the web app doesn't display properly. You might have the same issue, and if you have a computer, then I recommend that you do this on your computer. If you only have your phone, then the solution is to turn your phone from portrait into landscape mode. So instead of holding it like this, hold it like this, so that everything on the Idena web app gets displayed properly on your device. With that said, let's look into how the whole sign up works, and I'm gonna share my screen with you guys for that. As you can see on the Idena website, first of all, you'll always see a countdown as to when the next validation event is, and you can add that to your calendar, which you should definitely do so you don't miss the event. Here you can then choose if you want to install the Idena desktop app or the Idena web app, and in this case we are going with the Idena web app, which will bring you to a page that looks like this. Now, since I already logged into the Idena web app previously with my wallet, it remembers my wallet address, and all I would have to enter would be my password to continue here. However, you are going to sign up fresh, so I'm just going to copy the address and open an incognito tab. And that is exactly what you should see when you first sign up for the Idena web app. And you will have an option here to create an account, which you can press. It will show you your Idena wallet address. You don't have to remember that or write it down because you will see it later as well. So you can just click on proceed and pick a password. Now I'm just going to pick something random here because I won't use that account in the future anymore. It's just for the purpose of this video. You should obviously remember your password or write it down somewhere and click on next. On the next step, you get to see your encrypted private key. This is something that you should never share with anybody, because with the private key, people could try to brute force your password and basically gain access to your account. So make sure that you keep that key somewhere safe, and also be aware that if you forget or lose that key, you lose access to your account. So you'll have to copy that key. I'm just going to copy it to the clipboard and then confirm that you understand the risks of losing that key, and click on next again. And with that, you've successfully created your account and you can go to the sign in. Now on the sign in page for the web app, you can simply paste your private key and enter the password that you picked, and then click on import. So you actually log into your account and you will see this screen here that asks you for an invitation code. Now, as mentioned earlier, in order to get an invitation code, you can either jump on the Idena Telegram channel, the Idena Discord, or you can jump on my Discord, to which you can find a link in the description of the first pinned comment down below. On that Discord server, you will find an Idena invitation code channel, and in there you can mention that you need one, and hopefully either I or one of the community members will actually have Idena invitation codes to share with you. Now, once you have that invitation code, you can go back to the web app and there then paste that invitation code. For now, I'm going to click skip for now to just show you the next steps. So assuming you have an invitation code or you skip the invitation code input, you will see a screen that looks like this. Although if you already have an invitation code, you obviously will not see the activate invite anymore. And here you have two options: to rent a shared node or to enter a shared node API key. Now, likely you won't have the API key for a shared node, so your option is to press rent a shared node, click on continue, and you will see a list of shared nodes and how many slots they have available, plus the price per validation. And theoretically, you could go to Probit Exchange and buy one or more iDNA and then transfer them to your Idena wallet address. However, once you validate or activate your invitation code, as far as I recall, you also receive a 1 or 2 Idena credits, so you will not have to pay that fee because you receive it as a credit anyways. So you would then go ahead and choose any of those shared nodes based on their location, so how close they are to you, and the price per validation, and simply select that node and click on continue, which will open up the transfer dialog. Now, since I don't have an invitation code for this new Idena identity, I have no balance, so I cannot continue here. But you, again, once you activated your invitation code, should have 1 or 2 Idenas to actually transfer them and therefore rent the access to the node. And every time or with every validation event, you will have to rent the node again or stay with the same node and pay the same fee. However, again, every time you pass the validation, you'll also earn more than that. So in the end, it makes it profitable for you. And just a quick reminder for those of you that get super overwhelmed right now, so all you have to do is basically go through those account sign-up steps, get your invitation code, and then participate in the validation events during which you have to solve flips as shown earlier in the video. And after you pass the validation, once you achieve at least a newbie status, you'll also have to submit your own flips after the validation event. And every time you do that, so every time you pass the validation event, you submit flips, and in the next validation, your flips also don't get disqualified by the community. You earn more and more Idena that you can then simply transfer from the web app or from the desktop app, depending on which one you're using, to the Probit exchange, for example, and exchange there into USDT or other cryptocurrencies. And to quickly show you how the transfer works and also to show you, as promised, how the desktop app looks like, I'm again going to share my screen with you guys, and you can see the Idena node that I've running on our Windows computer. You can see my status, as mentioned, is currently suspended because after I passed 4 validations, I missed the 5th one, and if I don't pass the next one in 9 days, my account would actually get killed. And as you can also see, I currently have a staking balance of 80 Idena and an actual balance of 35. And now if we go to the wallet section within the app, which also works the same in the web app once you've actually activated your invitation and passed your validation, you can see your main balance and your staking balance. And one important thing I missed so far is to mention that while your status is not verified, 80% of your balance will automatically be staked and only 20% will be available for you to transfer. Once you achieve the verified status, that will switch, so 80% of your Idena will be available to transfer and 20% will be locked in still, so you will not be able to use them. Now, when you look at my account, you can obviously see that this is not 80-20, because if you look at the transaction history, you can see that I already transferred funds from the Idena wallet to the Probit exchange. And how does that work? Well, it couldn't be any easier. You just press send and then enter the wallet address that the exchange provides you with and the amount, and with that you actually send your Idena to the Probit exchange, where you, as mentioned, can then exchange them into USDT and then further into other cryptocurrencies as well. And that's pretty much it. Now, I know that Idena is more complicated compared to other projects that I reviewed on this channel so far, but I still believe it's worth your time if you generally have time at 1:30 p.m. UTC. So if in general you are available at the time when the validations take place, then I would say give it a try and make sure that you don't miss validations, so that you actually increase your status and achieve human as fast as possible, and then with every validation earn more and more Idena that you can either, if you believe in the project, hold for the long term and potential gains in the value of the Idena coin, or instantly transfer to the Probit exchange and their exchange to USDT. If you have any question whatsoever, don't forget you can always leave them in the comments down below, or even better, use the link in the description of the first pinned comment down below to join our Discord community and discuss Idena with me and the community there. As always, thanks for watching. See you in one of my other videos. Till then, bye bye.